She is the co-host of Cari and Jamele Won't Stick to Sports on Vice TV. We welcome Cari Champion onto Hoopsology. How's it going, Cari?
It's going well. Thank you so much for having me.
No problem. So Cari, we know you're such a massive Lakers fan, and we wanted to get your insight just in terms of this most recent title, what it meant to you as a Lakers fan, considering all the circumstances. Can you kind of describe your feelings and emotions just watching the Lakers capture the title this year?
Wow. Okay, so where do I begin? Let me just take a minute to breathe and then begin. No, as a Lakers fan, I truly have to explain to you just the history, right? So I grew up here in LA, and my love of sports came from when, my grandmother would take me to the Great Western Forum where the Lakers used to play, and she taught me the game. And it was a rite of passage in my family to love the Lakers. Like, if you didn't love the Lakers, you can't be a part of the family. It was just, we went to all the parades. It was during the early 80s, mid 80s when they were winning. We went to all the parades. We did everything that we were supposed to do in terms of being hardcore fans. And so that's where my love for them grew. And that's all I ever knew in terms of my real first introduction to sports. So it's been a while, right? And it was horrible when Kobe died. It was palpable. You could feel the sadness, obviously worldwide, but in the city, there was a clear fog and sadness when Kobe Bryant and his daughter and the rest of those who perished in that in that helicopter crash died. It was really sad. And then for us to be able to end the year on a high note, it was special and it was nice. And we all knew it felt like it was for Kobe, right? And it was just beautiful. It was such a highlight. It was the silver lining of what had been such a tough year for everybody because of the pandemic.
And can you describe LeBron James in particular, what he means to the LA Lakers now that he was on the forefront of really honoring Kobe's memory and then also winning the title I would think that since he had a previous history, as we all know, with previous teams and now coming to the Lakers, is he kind of like officially in the family now that he captured that title?
It's so funny that you say that, because I was one of those Laker fans that did not like LeBron. Like I could not stand him when he first stepped on the scene. And he and I have discussed this because I felt like it was all about Michael Jordan and Kobe. And then when LeBron became, LeBron, people began the comparisons of LeBron and forgot about Kobe. Kobe was just washed, he wasn't the great anymore. So I used to remember thinking all the Laker fans, they felt some type of way. There was a bit of, protectiveness over Kobe's legacy. And we always were like, stop forgetting about Kobe. It would be Michael Jordan, LeBron, and then Kobe. We're like, don't forget about Kobe, And then when he got here, there was still pushback. I remember thinking that. But at the end of the day, winning, you all know this, it's so cliche, but winning cures all. And his title, and he has said privately and sometimes publicly, it would take me, he said, 2 years max to win a chip. He knew that coming in. It was just about right. And, I think everybody appreciates him. And I also feel like, with the passing of Kobe, it just changed so much. It was like, LeBron has cemented a place in Laker history, but, he won't, he can't say and I think that he wouldn't even compare himself in terms of what kind of Laker great Kobe was. He's just a part of the family now. And we're grateful to have him.
Makes sense. I wanted to ask you about the James Harden situation that's been all over the news the past 2 weeks. We got a little more insight from reports as to how kind of the dynamic was with Houston and kind of, catering to James Harden, let's say. How do you think is the best way to approach a relationship with a superstar player if you are kind of putting your GM cap on or your front office hat on? Do you think that this is a situation that's an example of maybe like an unhealthy relationship developing? Obviously not knowing all the details myself, but how do you think you manage these big NBA personalities and these guys that are really their own mega brands nowadays?
what I'm probably going to say is going to be very unpopular to those who are not the big personalities are being catered to, but I think it's been that way since the beginning of time. I think with the advent of social media and reporting and 24-hour reporting, we're learning more about it. But I really have a hard time believing that there weren't special allowances made for Magic or Kareem or Larry Bird, or even MJ for that matter. We saw it during, during the documentary. So I think it just will always be that way. And you have to determine if you want to be a part of it. Like once it starts, you can't turn it off. I don't know. I think maybe Pat Riley might be the last of the Mohegans in terms of the last of the tried and true that tries to treat everyone the same. But, that didn't even work out for him. If he had to do it over again, I think he would have made some different allowances for LeBron and for D-Wade for that matter. So I think that there's a way to manage it, but so I have a friend who obviously I have tons of friends who play in the league, but he said, you want to know where you stand on the team, be late for the play or be late for the bus. If I'm making up a name, if Kawhi is, late, they'll wait. You read that too. So, but if you are not that person, they'll leave you. It is what it is. And I don't know if there's a way to manage that because, again, you just said it. They're their own brands. They're their own entity. And basketball is one of those sports where you become bigger than the team. It's one of those sports where, yes, it's a team sport, but the players have really taken ownership. Not just the mega players, but the players in general. It is the way that they lead this league, the way they move in the league. It's so different than any other league. In football, the things that they are not allowed to do or would be intimidated to do is the list is long in comparison to what happens in the NBA. The players do feel like, yes, they obviously have an obligation, and they, I'm sure a lot of them didn't want to have a 71-day off season. You know what I mean? But the reality is that they really do control, if not one or two players really do control the momentum of what happens. Very few are in positions to that have leverage, and then those few who do have the leverage, you see what happens. I really truly think we're starting to see more of it because we see how LeBron has been moving. I think everyone has been trying to emulate what he has created in terms of creating a team and being his own, agent, if you will, his own manager, if you will, his own coach. Like Kobe was his own coach. Kobe wasn't. You can take Kobe out the game. You know what I mean? Not he'd be like no. He'd be like no, thank you. I'm all set.
So what do you make of Kyrie Irving, for instance, that seems to be pushing the boundaries? It didn't necessarily end well with the Boston Celtics. And now even before this season, before he got hurt, there's some reports coming out with friction with him. Do you think that superstar status in terms of those privileges, in terms of kind of having that leniency can kind of wear out its welcome, especially with this season if it doesn't work out playing with Kevin Durant?
Well, he hasn't worn out his welcome yet. And so he will if, in fact, he and Kevin don't get along. I'm very interested. First of all, just watching a little bit of them play was special. And their bond has been so clear, even, before Kevin Durant got hurt, even when I would see them during All-Star Weekend, and they were just always hand in hand before they made the announcement, in the sense of they were just, you could tell there was a true friendship. And I think they think alike in a lot of ways. They a lot of players don't trust the media, but they're skeptical of the media. They feel as if people consistently doubt who they are. They are living in someone else's shadow, if you will, even though they know they're the greatest. But there's an edge and there is a chip on both of their shoulders that I think where they really connect, and I think it's going to be special. What's going to happen, though, is, in my opinion, if they can't get along on the court, if one of them doesn't decide to step up and lead and not let the emotional aspect of it tear them down, they're going to be fine. But if the mood and if the mentality is not right, we'll see, one of them will find out who's the most valuable, right? So if they don't get along, we'll find out who they really care about. Like when they were in Golden State, when Draymond and and Kevin Durant had an apparent beef, you knew who the valuable player was. And I'm sure in that moment, Draymond knew too that, okay, they don't upset Kevin Durant. Like, I mean, that's what the deal was. And so I think with Kyrie, right now they get along and it seems to be okay. And he's taking his own high road and doing what he wants to do. But, you know, as long as it doesn't affect how they play on the court, no one's going to say anything. You know, I'm interested. I'm being careful with my words because I'm interested in seeing how that relationship manifests based on how they both have been able, or lack thereof, been able to work with others. So we heard of the problems that, you know, how Kyrie was frustrated when he was in Cleveland. We saw what happened when he was in Boston. You know, we saw what happened, you know, when, you know, Kevin Durant was in Golden State. They got along until they didn't. You know, and it's this thing that's happening with these players of late. Because, by the way, back in the day when I fell in love with the game, and I don't want to sound like get off my lawn, but we would never hear about these squabbles. Like the squabbles became like known when Kobe and Shaq started beefing. Like we would never. You think like I really have a hard time believing that, and I'll just use my team as an example. I have a hard time believing that Magic and Kareem always got along. You know, I have a hard time believing James Worthy wasn't irritated with something that, and I don't know any of this. I'm just telling you, I have a hard time believing that Byron Scott didn't like, Byron Scott has told me personally, he had beef with like Michael Thompson. So it's like, you know, I know it happens, but we just didn't hear about it as much. And now we're just so privy, back to my whole thought about social media, and it's become so common and everyone is so comfortable sharing stories and saying they don't get along. Well, back in the day, it wasn't an option. It wasn't an option to get up and leave and go somewhere else because they didn't want to play. They didn't want to play with them no more. You know what I mean?
Agreed. Just one last question for you. Shifting gears to how the league focused on social justice issues. I thought they did a fantastic job on all the networks of really tackling the issues in real time. Moving forward to this season, it seems like the league is taking less of a priority on highlighting social justice issues on kind of like a game-by-game basis. How do you think the league should approach these type of issues moving forward for the upcoming season, just considering that they're taking Black Lives Matter off the court? It seems like they're kind of moving on from the intense focus that was on the bubble.
Well, I think that's fine that they want to move on and they don't want to make that what this is all about. I think at the time they made a statement, but I think once you open that door, you can't close it. You know, I most recently worked the Sports Illustrated Awards, which are on tomorrow. And that was a big focus of the awards, like how these athletes, they were defining moments, especially in the bubble, that reverberated across this nation. You know, you remember once Adam said, guess what, there's no more NBA, March 11th, I think that was. We all knew then that this pandemic was serious, right? There were these moments, these defining moments where you had to stop and say, wait, oh, no more sports, and everyone followed suit. And then what they did was they allowed these players, which is not even allowed, they had to, right? You have to do it. You have to be able. You don't have to, but that has been Adam Silver's legacy. Like from the moment he became the commissioner and he got rid of the Clippers owner, former Donald Sterling. His legacy has always been about fairness and what's right and what's true, and how there is no room for that in this particular league. No room for racism, no room for any type of isms, if you will. He's always set that tone. So he's opened that door. And I believe if the players decide that they want to do, or individual teams decide that they want to do something, they will. There could be obviously repercussions, but I don't think that they will hesitate in making a stand if they need to, whether it be for a movement, whether it be for someone who may or may not have been, murdered by police. I believe that when and if the players or individual teams determine that that's what they want to do, they'll still do it. I mean, the league may not necessarily sanction it as a whole, but they've already opened that door. You can't walk that back. You can't say it's okay to protest and then say don't protest anymore. You can say we're moving on from it, meaning like it doesn't have to be the focus. But I have a hard time believing if something happened and the Milwaukee Bucks wanted to do a work stoppage that they felt really truly moved to do so. I just have a hard time believing they wouldn't. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
totally
probably
does.
be too much of a PR hit to go that route and try to be so public about silencing your employees,
You can't do it. You already allowed
Right.
them to have this huge platform, and they have their own platforms individually. Every mega player we talk about has created their own platform in other aspects outside of sports. And so they will inevitably be asked about social justice, Black Lives Matter movement. What are they doing? They will be asked. It is what it is. This is the new sports, if you will. There was a time, 80s and 90s, no one talked about it, but now it's at the forefront. This is what 2020 has done, and it's taken place in every industry. Obviously, we're talking about basketball, but it's taking place in every industry. You have what I like to call, corporate justice, where these big corporate companies are making statements and saying this, that, and the third, and hiring and trying to be better. But once you start with your statements and try to say that this is where you are, i.e. on the right side of justice, you can't walk that back PR-wise, like you just said, because people say, well, Roger Goodell, didn't you just say that you made a mistake? Well, and if someone really, truly wanted to press the issue, one of these players wanted to press the issue and any league tried to say no, they'd find themselves in a bit of uncomfortable situation, like you said, publicly.
Absolutely. Well, Cari, thank you for joining the show. Really appreciate it. Where can our listeners find your TV show?
Okay, so it's on Vice and Vice TV. So you could just, ask your cable provider or search Vice TV if you have cable, and it'll tell you how to pop up and grab it. And it also is on the Vice app, VICE app, Vice app. It's 11:30 Thursdays. It's called Cari and Jamele Won't Stick to Sports.
Awesome, Cari. We really enjoyed the chat. Thank you very much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. You guys have a good one, okay? Happy holidays.